Welcome to the Painting Coach, and in this video I'm very excited to show you how to paint one of the Krieg Veteran Guardsmen. Now these have been out for a while, but Games Workshop did send these to me so I can create some content around the new Astra Militarum release, so a huge thank you to them for that. And in this scheme we're going to paint it with that slightly lighter trench coat than I've shown you in my previous tutorials, so let's get painting. So I've primed the model using Chaos Black spray. Any black spray will do, you just want a dark undercoat to start with. We'll start off with a 50-50 mix of Incubi Darkness and Abaddon Black. And what I'm looking to do with this is paint this all over the trench coat. Now, I am going to include painting the cuffs as well as those folded back elements as well, where you see the brighter colour of the underneath of the trench coat. And that's just going to make it easier later on when we do use some lighter colours. So all we're looking to do here is get a nice even coat. This should cover in one, but if not, then don't be afraid of putting a second one on. Next up, we're going to use pure Incubi Darkness, and again, we're going to paint the majority of the trench coat here. We're only going to leave that first mix in the deepest recesses, as that's going to be our shadow. Now, another way of doing this is to paint it all with Incubi Darkness and pop Nuln Oil over it. But this way, I feel it's just cleaner and crisper, and it doesn't give you that risk of pooling or puddling either. And don't forget to paint all of the cuffs and the inside of the coat as well. Once that's dry, we'll start to refine the highlights on the trench coat a bit, and the colour underneath this is Dark Reaper. Now, I'm generally just going to start focusing on the most raised areas and any folds, leaving the Incubi Darkness and that mix in the recesses. Now, we've shifted the hue a little bit here, so we've gone from a greeny shadow into more of a bluey grey highlight, and once it's all finished, you'll see it all come together quite nicely. So just work your way around here. If you do make any mistakes, you can always paint over it with the previous colour. The final highlight we'll do for now is with some Thunderhawk Blue. And what I'm looking to do here is catch the raised areas. So we're looking particularly at any sharp folds or creases. Now, of course, where the coat buttons up in the front, there are quite a lot of sharp elements, things like the collar of the coat as well. So just make sure you catch all of these. And it's worth saying that I'm painting the trousers exactly the same way as I'm painting the trench coat at this point. And we'll start to differentiate a little bit as we move forward from here. To add the brighter cuffs and the brighter inside of the trench coat, I'm going to take some Russ Grey. Now, you do need to thin this down a little bit so you do get a nice smooth finish, and you will need 2 or 3 coats. The key here is to take your time and be tidy so you don't spill it on the outside of the trench coat, which is nearly finished. To shade those areas, I'm going to take a 50-50 mix of Gryph-Charger Grey contrast paint and contrast medium. And I'm going to paint this over the Russ Grey. So we're looking at the inside of the coat that's pinned open as well as the cuffs on the arms. Don't be afraid if it doesn't look dark enough once it's dry to just put a second coat on there. It's better to go with a thinner coat to start with because it just makes that transition a bit easier. When that's completely dry, we'll start highlighting back up using Russ Grey. Now the key here is to leave that Gryph-Charger Grey in the recesses. And if you thin your Russ Grey a little bit, it should dry and blend down into the layers underneath. So you can build up quite a smooth transition quite easily. The final highlight we'll do on the inside of the coat is with Fenrisian Grey. And what we're looking to do here is just drag the brush along those really sharp edges to get nice, crisp, bright highlights. So just take your time with this and really think about where you're going to put it. If you do make any mistakes, you can always paint over it with Russ Grey. The other thing we're going to do with the Fenrisian Grey is we're going to use this for a final highlight on the rest of the trench coat as well, particularly focusing on those sharp edges. So across the top of the coat, where it joins across and buttons on the collar, and a little bit around where the buttons pull as well, just to really make the coat pop a little. That's the trench coat finished, so now it's time to paint all of the metallic areas, at least the silver metallics for now. We'll do the gold later on. The colour I'm using for this is dark aluminium from Vallejo. You can use whatever dark silver colour that you prefer. If you've got lead belcher or if you've got surcoat silver, that's absolutely fine. The key is to make sure you've got nice smooth coverage and you've been very careful around the trench coat because that should now be finished. We've got things like the helmet, the shoulder pads, there's armour panels on the hands and also the sword and any other silver areas. It's also useful at this point to paint the eye sockets with the dark aluminium. This is just going to make it a lot easier later on when it comes to painting that gas mask. For most of the silver, I'm going to shade that using some Nuln Oil. So I'm just going to take my time here and not spill it on areas of the coat that I've already finished. The key thing here, I'm going to avoid painting the helmet and the shoulder pads because we're going to paint them darker to give them a little bit of that kind of really dark gunmetal effect that helps us weather them up really nicely. For the helmet and the shoulder pads, I'm going to take a 50-50 mix of Black Templar contrast paint and contrast medium. Make sure this is nice and well mixed and you haven't got a huge amount on your brush, and then paint this all over the helmet and all over the shoulder guards. Now, you don't want this to pool in any one area, and it shouldn't do. It should be fine, but just keep an eye on it. Make sure you spread it out really nicely. It'll look really dark to start with, but then as it dries, you'll start to get a nice matte, dark gunmetal grey silver colour coming to life. So this is a really nice effect, and it's quite nice and easy to weather up as well. To highlight all the silver, I'm going to use Chrome from Vallejo Model Air. Now, there's not a huge amount of highlights to do, but generally where I do need to do them, I'm going to drag the brush along the edge of the model, like along the sword here. And that gives you a really nice, crisp highlight on the edge. When it comes to those darker panels, such as the helmet and the shoulder guards, all I'm looking to do is just, rather than drag the brush along the edge, I'm looking to tap the brush along the edge, because that's going to give the impression of a little bit of chipping on the metal along the areas you'd expect some wear and tear. So just work your way along the helmet, tapping the brush along the edges. If you do happen to put too much on, and I've done that in a few places, you can just take a little bit of that Black Templar contrast medium mix and just tidy it up, and you will not notice. Moving on to some of the lighter areas then, we'll take some Zandri Dust and we're going to use this to paint the wraps along the shins. We're going to use this to paint the blanket or bedroll across the back of the backpack. And we're also going to use it to paint the gas mask. Now, it's really important here that you take your time on the gas mask in particular. It is a very small element, but this is why it was useful to paint the eye sockets earlier, because you can just paint up to them rather than having to go back in and try and add silver later on. So be as tidy as you can here. If you are a little messy, you can always go back and tidy up. For the wraps and the bedroll across the back of the backpack, I'm going to shade it down with some Seraphim Sepia. This is nice, easy and straightforward. I just want to get it into those recesses so we can start to build up a little bit of contrast. I'm not going to use this on the gas mask. Once that's completely dry, we'll start to highlight, and the colour I'm using for this is Ushabti Bone. And generally what I'm looking to do is highlight all of the wraps on the leg to get a nice lighter finish, leaving the darker colours in the recesses. And also when I'm doing the blanket as well, that's exactly the same effect. So just take your time doing this and working your way around. You may need to put a couple of coats of Ushabti Bone on that bedroll. When it comes to the gas mask itself, we're going to paint most of it, but we are going to leave the part of the gas mask which would cover the cheekbones and the mouth, that darker colour. So the Zandri Dust will be in the recesses and the Ushabti Bone will be the highlights. The final highlight that we'll use on all of those areas is going to be with Bright Ivory, which is from Pro Acryl. Now, if you haven't got this, you can try mixing some white paint in with your Ushabti Bone. You just want a nice bright bone colour. And we're going to paint fairly thin lines along the wraps and also that bedroll. And when it comes to the gas mask, again, we're going to really just focus on the bits facing up. So we've got the bits around the eyes and that just work down the mask into the connector to the breathing tube. Next up, we'll base all of the leather, and the colour I'm using for this is Rhinox Hide. So make sure you haven't got too much on your brush and that you have thinned the paint down a little bit, because Rhinox Hide can be a little lumpy. And just go ahead and paint all of the leather areas. So we've got things like the backpack, we've got lots of straps. We've also got that gas mask airflow regulator on the front as well. And you may have additional equipment on your Kriegsman that just need to be painted. The first highlight is with Doombull Brown. Now, essentially, we're going to paint all of the leather areas using the Doombull Brown. We're just going to leave the Rhinox Hide in the recesses. So we're not bothering with washing. It saves us a colour, and actually it does blend in quite nicely, and you get quite a nice reddy brown leather doing it this way. Just make sure you take your time around those elements you've already finished, because there are now quite a few on the model. The final highlight on the leather is a nice edge highlight, and the colour we're going to use for this is Skrag Brown. So where you can drag the brush along the sharp edges of the backpack and that regulator along the front, and also the shoulder straps that hold everything together. Just take your time and make sure you don't spill it on bits you've already finished. If you want to add some scuffs to the leather, you can do that now as well, just by putting some little stippled dots and lines across it if you want to. We'll paint the black elements next, and I'm just going to go back in with some Abaddon Black and paint over things like the shoes, the gloves, and in this case the plasma pistol. You may have just a normal las rifle that you need to paint depending on which model you're doing. I'm then going to take some Eshin Grey and use this to highlight along all the edges of the black element. So this is fairly straightforward. If you do put it on too thickly, then don't worry, you can always go back in with some Abaddon Black to fix it. So again, we're focusing on the boots, we're focusing on things like the fingers on the hands, and we're going to do some line highlighting on the plasma pistol. The final highlight on all the black is going to be with some Dawnstone. So again, just use this fairly sparingly. Make sure you keep it inside the Eshin Grey from the previous stage. So on the gas mask pipe, for example, we're just going to make sure we paint some nice dots going down it. For the fingers, we're just going to drag it along the shape of the model to get those crisp highlights, and the same for the plasma pistol. This model is really starting to come together quite nicely now, so let's get the gold done. Now, there's two options here. You could just take some Nasjug yellow and paint over it if you've already painted it silver. That's okay and simple. I'm going to go the more traditional route. I'm going to take Dragon's Gold from 2 thin coats and paint this over all the gold elements. If you haven't got this, you can use something like a Retributor armor from Citadel. It's exactly the same. I'm going to shade all of the gold with a little bit of Reikland Fleshshade. Again, if you haven't got any gold elements like the hilt on the sword, you could probably get away without using the wash, but because I've got it on there, I do just want to make a little bit more contrast. The final gold highlight is going to be with glistening gold, again from 2 thin coats. If you haven't got this, Liberator Gold from Citadel is absolutely perfect for this. And all I'm really going to do is drag the brush along those areas that I think are going to catch the light and help the gold stand out. On the helmet, there is that aquila or eagle. So again, just be careful with this, leaving those colours in the recesses so you do get a nice little highlight. All we've got to finish really now are things like the plasma coils and the eyes, and also the power node on this sword. So I'm going to take a bright white colour. I'm using AK white. You can use whatever white you've got. If you've got white scar, that's absolutely fine. And all I'm looking to do is basically paint those elements in and make sure that I get a nice even coverage. So it might take 2 coats of the white, but I'm painting those plasma coils, I'm painting the power node, and I'm also painting the eye sockets, being very careful to leave that silver rim around the outside. For the plasma, I'm going to take some Frostheart contrast paint and just paint this all over the white of the plasma coil. I'm also going to paint this over the power node on the sword as well. And what you'll start to see is as it dries, it'll settle nicely in the recesses, giving you a nice bright blue effect. So it's really easy plasma without too much time investment. For the eyes, I'm going to take some Blood Angels red contrast paint and just carefully place this into those areas I've already based with the white. And there we go, this Veteran Guardsman is done and he's ready for the tabletop. I'm really happy with how the models turned out. It was quite quick to do, so I'm looking forward to getting a full squad of 10 painted soon to go alongside the field artillery piece and Lord Marshal Dreer. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.